Once it is complete, I'll upload that to YouTube, just so you know that. We have some great upcoming sessions. On November 30th, Krista Sievertson is going to be offering Extreme Makeover Classroom Edition, where she shows all about setting up a classroom with great structure in ways that can be really supportive to having a special education classroom set up. On December 7th, we'll be having AAC in the classroom with Tina Olson. She's pairing with a speech language pathologist that she works with to show about some AAC usage in the classroom, really functional ways to do that. Today, here's what we're going to be talking about. There's a lot to go through on each of these topics. I was saying before we got started that this could be a half day at least training, but we'll move it into half an hour and I'll move quickly. But just know that there are links in this slideshow, and also I'm happy to touch base with any of you or any of your teams to do more in-depth trainings on any of these topics. First, we'll talk about just what is assistive technology. What are some examples? We'll go into very briefly how to consider that, and then look at just what your individual next steps are. We'll also have some more resources and things at the end, as in etc. So let's just jump in and get going with what is AT. I think sometimes teams struggle with what is actually considered AT. When they talk about documenting it in an IEP, it's like, what do I even list in there? Well, the federal definition is that an AT device is any piece of equipment or an item, product, system. So these kind of come in threes. So it's item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially off the shelf, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities. So again, that's the federal language surrounding assistive technology. And then you'll see the fine print at the bottom there is that it does not include a medical device that is surgically implanted. So something like a cochlear implant would not be considered assistive technology. Also, the federal definition talks about AT services, and basically that's any service that assists a child with a disability in selecting, acquiring, or using any AT device. But usually when we're talking about AT, we're often talking about this definition of the AT device. That's long legalese, but the general idea is that anything that helps a child do something that they couldn't do otherwise. And if it's something that a child needs to do a task, that then becomes their assistive technology. So it doesn't have to be something that's specially ordered from a super specialized category. As you'll see on this slide here from Let's Participate, which was a 5-year program funded by the Office of Special Education Programs, the OSEP, that there are a range of AT sources. At the top in the smallest category is customized specialty items for disability. So in the picture there, you'll see that that's a gait trainer, right? So that's something you might work with your physician to order. It's very specialized, might need some training and setup to do that. On the next larger box there, it shows modified, so something that has been adapted for supports. So that young child is just on a little scooter there, but he's got it modified with some seating adaptations to hold him in place on that item. So it's just been modified. And then there are things that are just off the shelf. They're universally designed for all children, but they might be something that provides some support for a child that they specifically need. So this question is something that you can always ask yourself, is it AT? And we know that it is AT when a child with a disability needs an item in order to do something that they couldn't do without it. It becomes their AT. So anything that supports a child in doing just about any task, that becomes their AT, whether it's something you buy off the shelf, modify, or is specially designed for that purchase. Janine, I see your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, I was just wondering, does it have to be technology? Because like the little scooter wasn't technology, So, okay, go ahead.
No, that's a beautiful question, Janine. And we're going to get into that a little bit. But yeah, there does not have to be actually any technology included in assistive technology. I think sometimes that term can be a little misleading. You're absolutely right that assistive technology doesn't have to have any technology. Great question. And we'll go into some examples of things that include those things that don't really have any AT or any technology in AT. Great question. All right. So here, what are some examples of AT? Again, these are some slides from the Let's Participate program. This here they're talking about things that are off the shelf. In the upper left-hand corner, there's a picture of a book that just has tabs on the corners that would allow a children that might have some minor motor issues to be able to turn the pages within a book. So that's something that's just off the shelf. There are some paintbrushes there that have a bulb top where a child could just grasp with a full hand grasp to be able to use a larger motor movement to do some painting there. There is a bath chair that would support a child for sitting better, some some blocks with tactile additions on them that would just allow a child perhaps with some visual difficulties to be able to feel those pieces out a little better. There are some spoons there that have a change in the angle and a built up grip that would also support some motor function. And then you can also see an iPad there. Again, something that might be supporting some academic tasks or cause and effect, just things that can be purchased off the shelf. And then also, like iPads have accessibility features that are just built in right off the shelf. Sometimes those are things that have adaptable or flexible design that support development as their needs change. This particular series shows a child sitting there in a supported seat with this particular toy kind of at an angle while that child is there so that they can access it directly. Then, as that child is moving into a crawling stance, that can be put on the ground for access that way. And then as they move into a standing pose, then that particular toy that's being shown can be made into a standing level height. So again, some of those things just built in off the shelf to adapt to different needs. Sometimes we can modify AT that would just increase the independent access to common materials. These things are homemade and it adapts things that you would just buy off the shelf. Can be a total range of costs, might require some training or specialized knowledge, but not always. You'll see there's a shaker for music or noise making that just has a built up handle by putting a foam handle on there that makes that a bigger grasp. Switch access to an iPad can be modifying that iPad so that instead of direct select with a finger, it's by hitting a switch. There is a slant board that just provides closer access to just about anything books, iPads, things like that. Toys that are switch adapted can be a different way to access those instead of a small button that might be turning that thing on. It would be a switch located wherever a child might need to access that motorically. There is a picture of like a remote control car, but within a range. So it's in almost like a dish there with a little bit of a rim so that that stays within a certain area and supports that need to be able to stay in close proximity. There's a picture of a paper clipped on. Basically they're called page fluffers, so it's something that makes those pages thicker. Before we saw you could buy off the shelf some books with tabs on them. This is one that would help support page turning but with just a thickness to the page added on there. And a picture book for communication where you're just taking a picture album and putting in your own pictures so that you're modifying it that way to make it individualized to that child's needs. These sometimes are a little harder to see, but if I'll tell you about them. That shopping cart there, as that child is pushing that on carpet, I'm guessing that was a little slippery. And so what they did is they put Velcro on the wheels so that he could get a little more friction as he pulled or pushed rather, so that it wouldn't slide out in front of him. And then the other picture is just the top of a copy paper box to bring the floor up level for that child so that his feet aren't just dangling, but instead have a place to rest on that box. So, again, those are some completely homemade or modified options. Now we're going to go into a little bit of thinking about different tasks for things. And this is exactly, Janine, like you asked, we're going to talk about no or low tech options in any of these tasks or areas, rather, some mid tech and some high tech. We don't need to go into great debates about whether something's considered mid tech or high tech, but you kind of know it when you see it. But it's a really good point that some things have absolutely no tech involved in them, even though they're considered assistive technology. For example, a ball with spikes to be able to support the grasp rather than a smooth ball could be assistive technology if that student needs it, even though there's absolutely no technology per se included there. Mid tech might be things like switch adapted toys or a dice roller. Like the high roller is one of the 2 Minute Tuesday emails that went out. That basically you just press down on it and it rolls the dice for a child rather than having to hold the dice in hands and then drop them and keep them on the table. The high tech items might be something like an iPad with apps or a switch click USB, which, if you haven't seen that, I've got one here. It's just an item like this. It's a switch and it has a USB cord that you would just plug into the computer. And then what it does is it functions as a click on a mouse. So if you had something that would like advance the page of a book, a student who could access a switch could just be clicking this to go to the next page. So wherever you would have the mouse, it would just click to do whatever it is on that page. So just a way for computer access. That might be mid-tech more than high-tech, but whatever. A good option for access for students. Adaptive or self-help or activities of daily living. Many of you probably have or are using picture schedules with students. Any of those visual supports, while there's some technology used in printing them out, once you've got them, they're pretty no or low tech. So those are a common item that is considered assistive technology if a student needs it. In mid-tech, we've got time timers. I got piles of stuff here. If I dig for a second, they come in all sorts of different sizes. Here's a giant one. They come in smaller ones. That link there will take you. They even come in different colors now, but if you turn it, there's an on switch in the back. And what it does is you can turn it to however much time you want. Once it's on, it will count down so that the student or individual can see that red is disappearing as the time goes on. It's just silent, but there is a noise at the end that indicates that the time is up. But I'll leave that on for just a second and you'll be able to see as that time goes away. Also, time timer is available on the computer. So, or you probably have used other timers, visual timers on a computer. This is supportive for students who need to know how much longer they've got things to do or to know when the time is up for a particular task that they're doing. But hopefully you can see subtly that red is going away as I'm talking here. And again, they're available in different times. And again, just an option of like, it's the identical thing, but it can be high or low or mid or low tech, depending on which version of that you would have. All right. Communication and language is a big area, I think, where people often consider assistive technology. A PECS book, Picture Exchange Communication System, is a book or a system where a student is taking pictures and exchanging them with a communication partner to indicate wants, needs, eventually higher level tasks within that. But any of those communication systems that are like printed and hard copy would be a great example of a no or low tech option. In mid-tech, we've got talking bricks, which another 2 Minute Tuesday went out about that, but they're basically just these small blocks or bricks. They come apart if you know how to do it and do it in the right direction. But they're just small bricks or blocks that then you can record one message on. And with an on switch on the back, it'll just play an individual message. It's recorded voice up to 10 seconds, and you could pair those together however you wanted. The clear cover comes off. Clear cover comes off, and you can replace a picture underneath that. Otherwise, they just come in multiple colors. You can maybe see that that one's red. There's a green and usually a blue one that comes in a set of 3. So very simple single message. They're magnetic. You could stick them up around a room. It could be real simple messages for requesting or giving messages. A quick talker is another mid-tech option that they come in sort of different sizes or number of choices. The one on the slide, I think, has 9 and then the 3. This one has 20 and then the 3. So the 3 at the top stay all the time as messages. This again is recorded voice, but the ones at the bottom can swap out. As you swap out the overlay, you can hopefully, that's clear that there's an overlay that slides in and out of there. I don't have any pictures in it right now, but I will turn it on with the button on the back. And then you have a choice of 5 different overlays. So you can have 5 different recordings already set up, and then you would swap out the overlays. But it would basically, and you can just have all these 3 messages would stay the same, and then you can record any 20 messages here that you would want. So anything that would be appropriate for your student, or if you're doing core vocabulary, that would be another kind of mid-tech option. I'm guessing that most people have probably seen at some level some of the high-tech speech generating devices. You maybe have heard of Tobii Dynavox, Prenke Romic, Forbes. There are many companies out there that create and sell these very high-tech speech generating devices. They have great language systems within them, and some of them even have eye gaze options, so there's no motoric planning required for them. That would be something you are more than likely working with your speech language pathologist in developing and implementing. So just a few options on the communication and language area. Reading, again, we're flying here, but I just want to kind of show you quick options of some of these. But in reading, some no or low tech are things like colored overlays. There are these strips like this that have basically, they will mask above and below and then highlight the text that you put in the middle of that. So it basically just isolates one line of text for a student. There are other ones that will highlight a larger area and do some magnifying. Not sure if that's clear there. And then others are larger, will highlight a larger area with a variety of different colors. And then of course there are just full sheets that will just will color change the whole page. So lots of options in the lower no tech colored overlays option. The C-Pen reader, I think a 2-Minute Tuesday went out on this one. And if you turn that on, C-Pen reader is just this little digital pen thing here. And once it turns on, I'll go into the reader function of that. The orange one is the exam reader. That doesn't have the dictionary attached to it, but if it's the white version, is the typical C-Pen reader, and that has like a dictionary function too and does translation and things like that. But what we often use it for is the task of reading hard copy text. So what I do is I just take it and, let's see if I can get a good angle here. I just take it and highlight the text with it. And then I don't think you heard it read aloud. Let me try one more time and I'll get a better angle on it. So what it did, I just dragged it across the text like this, and then it reads the text aloud. I'm not getting a good angle on it, which is when I'm doing it up here, so that's why I wasn't reading too great. But basically what it'll do is read a line of text, and then as soon as you pick it up, it'll read that text aloud. You can plug in headphones so that the student doesn't need to, not every student in the room needs to listen to it, but it's a great a great option for hard copy text, especially if you're just looking at like individual words and things like that. Worksheets.
I was just going to reiterate the point that you made about the headphones. It can be discreet, some of those kiddos with, maybe a reading disability and such. So, yeah.
Yeah, great point, Alicia. And I
Mhm.
think that's a good point too to consider anytime we're considering any assistive technology, the students' abilities and preferences need to go into that too, and their comfort level with some of those things. So sometimes a little more discreetness can make them a little more comfortable with that. So that's a really good point. Something to think about too then is things like universal design. Like when we're making things available to every student, it becomes that much more acceptable, I guess, for some students when they're feeling uncomfortable about using different things. And one of those things that we have for Duluth Public Schools is Read and Write for Chrome. Um, and that is a Chrome extension. And my mouse stopped working, but if I come over here, it's a Chrome extension, so I won't go too much into those, but they live up here. And basically, what that'll do is it will read text aloud for you. So I just did a Google search on here, but if I highlight text, then I can just press play. Could you guys hear that? Could you hear what that was reading? Okay, sorry. It's the way my settings are probably set up. But basically, that's reading the text aloud in a computer generated voice, but they're much better now than they used to be. But it's highlighting as it goes, and you can change the highlighting and all of that. And so that's available for any student in Duluth Public Schools, and a number of students really like to use that. So that's linked on the slides there for that option. Bookshare is another one. Bookshare is a program that a 2 Minute Tuesday came out on that, and that is digital textbooks. No, I should say digital reading materials, not just textbooks, available for students with disabilities. So anyone with a documented disability, excuse me, can access Bookshare. So that's another option too within the reading world. Let's see here. Okay. So those were like whirlwind options of what is AT, or what some options of what AT can look like. Now let's talk just for a minute about how I consider AT. Usually, the framework that we talk about when we're talking about AT is we look at the SET framework, and that's looking at the student, the environments, the tasks, and the tools. This is a great tool for equity because basically what it can do is ensure that every student gets exactly what it is that they need to function in those environments, doing those particular tasks, and then overlaying those tools. So I will, on the next slide, we're going to look at a little bit more about the SET framework. This is taken from the Council for Exceptional Children, and they talk about the S being for students' strengths, their performance and weakness in just about any area. The environment is about the physical setup of the classroom, the materials being used, the instruction, and I would even say the people in that classroom as well. T for the tasks. What specifically is it that you're asking this student to do, or what is it that they want to do? And then what we do is we take the tools and we overlay that on the student in those environments doing those tasks. So that's the general overlay and overarching framework for looking at assistive technology. And now on the next slide, I would encourage you to, if you haven't looked at the slides yet, this one has a whole bunch of resources, both from some of the districts and co-ops around the region, looking at the particular AT consideration guides or processes that are used there. But also, I'd be curious to hear about any others that are being used regionally. There are lots of others available too, even if you just Google how do I consider AT. But there's the WADI, the Wisconsin AT initiative. Um, Joy Zabala, who pretty much started the SET framework, has a great resource there, the SET scaffold. And then Region 10 also has an AT consideration manual. There's some other resources at the end of these slides, but I'm just going to show you for a couple of seconds what the Duluth Public Schools one looks like. You'll notice that some others around the region look similar to this, but basically what there's some lengthy and more in-depth questions, but basically it's just looking at the student here in the first question. The areas of concern in the second one, I know this is very small to see, but again, it'll link in your handouts. The third question asks about the specific tasks that you're doing with a student, identifying the environments in question four, and then not until question five do we really get down into the tools, like what is currently being used in tools, have they worked, what other tools could be used, and then about documentation of that in the IEP. At the bottom of this particular one in tiny print, so this will be something you'll definitely want to check out in the links, are options for individual tools that might be helpful in any of those areas: communication, cognitive, reading, math, etc. So just know that that is a resource that you can access there. And back to the slides, just a reminder that other districts and co-ops also have resources linked here. Whirlwind. So what do I do next? This is a great question. But what I would encourage you to do is just take one moment now with our literal 1 minute left in this half hour and just think about what is it that you need to do next with in terms of considering assistive technology. That might be checking in with a director or coordinator as to what your particular district or co-op is using to consider assistive technology. That might be checking in with one case manager, if you're a related service provider, to think about what is something that we might want to consider using in terms of assistive technology. It might be researching one of the items that came up in the examples today. It kind of depends on where you and your district or co-op are at in terms of considering assistive technology and what your needs are. But I would encourage you to kind of just take half a moment here and just kind of think about what that next step would be for you individually. Leanne, it's time for question and answers, and I just saw your question there. Let me come back to the chat window because it just popped away from me. Leanne said she was looking for the link to the, okay, here's why, Leanne. It's at the Northland Learning Center. The Region 3 Lending Library is at the Northland Learning Center, or NLC. I can, in a second, drop a link in the window, or if anyone else has that, but it'll be at the NLC webpage, and then on the left-hand side, there will be the AT library piece. So yeah, we've got some great libraries, that regional libraries available. Many districts and co-ops have their individual libraries. And then there are also places like the Star Library in the state of Minnesota and the Pacer Simon Technology Center Library. So lots of great resources to borrow items. Perfect. Thanks, Shannon, for dropping that in. I appreciate it. All right. What other questions or comments do people have? You can type them in the chat window, unmute yourselves, whatever you'd like. All right, and I'll feel free to keep doing that as I go through these last couple of slides. Just so you know, here's some additional resources on assistive technology, so feel free to check any of those out. And then don't forget that we've got upcoming sessions on November 30th and December 7th. Keep your eye on your emails for those things. And a huge thank you to everyone who's been attending. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but just know that I will be hanging around to answer questions. And